Hi there, my name's Helen Simpson and I'm going to be narrating this PowerPoint video for you. I work for Norfolk and Suffolk Foundation Trust, and in these strange and unprecedented times we've decided to put our usual city workshops online so that people can view them from home if they're socially isolating. You should have a booklet that has been given to you so that you can kind of go through the pages and follow the PowerPoint. And we'll be giving you a call after this first session to see how you're getting on, see if the homework's working, and so on. Yeah, welcome to the PowerPoint presentation and let's crack on. So as it says on the screen, it's the first session of 4 sessions of managing emotions. So as it says on the screen, it's the first session of 4 sessions of managing emotions. My name's Helen Simpson. I'm a cognitive behavioural therapist. I work for Norfolk and Suffolk Foundation Trust and have done for more than 30 years. And I also have lived experience of anxiety and depression. So throughout this PowerPoint, we are also going to get some input from other people with lived experience. So hopefully it will seem like a kind of real experience for you, and not just a kind of here's some information that we're going to throw at you. So yeah. And the PowerPoint itself was actually devised by Deirdre Williams, who's one of the psychologists who works with me at the City Anchorage. So just to give you a little idea of what we're going to be doing. So each session will have the kind of same basic format. So we're going to have some mindfulness. We're going to have some tasks for you to do during the session. So it might be a good idea for you to have your booklet and or a pencil and paper with you, or whatever you use to record, phone or whatever. We're also going to be some teaching about emotional dysregulation, and about which was useful for people with personality disorder, or even if you haven't got that diagnosis but are finding that your emotions go up and down a lot. So we'll be teaching you some stuff, and then there'll be some tasks to try before the next session. So this kind of teaching only really works if you're doing things in between sessions. So you have to kind of try things out, try the techniques, and just keep practicing them. Otherwise, it's a bit like watching a gardening program but not going into the garden. You don't really get better at gardening unless you kind of go out there and do it. So this is the content of today's session, which I should just say will last about 2 hours, I think. I'm not sure exactly because I haven't done it without, probably less than 2 hours, because when we do a workshop we have kind of coffee breaks and things like that. So this is what we're going to do today. So first of all, we're going to understand about what it means to be emotionally sensitive. What's it like to be an emotionally sensitive person? And a bit about why does it happen? Why are some of us much more emotionally sensitive than others? Then we're going to look at how do we cope with that, and how sometimes when we try and cope with these very strong emotions that we have, that they end up in the longer term to be kind of less helpful. Then we're going to look at the function of emotions, because although they may just seem really annoying, there is actually a reason why we have these feelings. They actually serve a purpose, even if they might seem kind of like misguided. And then we're going to look at how can we make ourselves so that we're less vulnerable to having these kind of strong feelings. So try and make sure that you're set up for listening for the next kind of hour and a half, 2 hours, that you're not going to be interrupted, and there's no kind of other demands on your time, which I know is sometimes not easy, but this is for you, this is for your health. So try and have time set aside. If you want someone with you to support you, then that's fine. again, I said have something to kind of record on. So if you're going to kind of write notes on your phone or on a bit of paper, then have that handy. Yeah, and I have put on the slideshow that you can stop it when you want, but I think we may be showing this as a kind of live audio, I'm not sure. But if you can stop it, then feel free to stop it and go up and make a cup of tea or have a breather if it kind of gets a bit much. So here we have our first slide, and so what you can see here is the difference between the blue line is people who have borderline personality disorder, or as it's also known, emotionally unstable personality disorder, or it could be just anyone who's very, very strongly sensitive and reactive to things. And of course, these aren't necessarily bad things in themselves, but sometimes we perhaps live in a society where it's seen that you should man up and not be so sensitive. But this is a kind of graph, so you can see the blue where the triggering event, which you can see down the bottom there with the little arrow. So that could be anything. I mean, it could just be something that happens in your own body where you kind of suddenly notice your heart fluttering or your heart pounding. Or it could be that someone says something to you, it could be that you're late, it could be any number of things, and then you have a very strong reaction, and then that keeps for a very long time. Whereas the underneath you can see the white line, and so that is the more average person in the population who isn't so affected. They're affected a little bit, and then it kind of goes away quite quickly. So you can see there the very difference that there is between people who have emotional dysregulation and people who do not have it. So in this graph we have something called the window of tolerance. Now if you can see the middle section where you've got the blue arrows, that's called the window of tolerance, and that's when we have the right amount of emotion. So we're not feeling too emotional and we're not kind of numbed out. And at this time we can kind of maybe be aware that we're feeling something, perhaps know what that feeling is. We can process that emotion, and if we get information coming in, if someone's telling us something, we can respond to it in an appropriate manner and in a way that later on we won't kind of wish we hadn't. So this is the window of tolerance. Now at the top we have something called hyperarousal. So that's when you feel something so strongly that you don't really know what to do with yourself. So I think of it as a bit like when a predator comes into a field and there's some deer and they just run, and they're not necessarily thinking what is the best thing to do in this situation. They're just reacting to their feelings. So when we're hyper aroused, we tend to not necessarily do the things that are best in the long run, and it's also very hard for us to concentrate on what is actually happening, and it's hard for us to shift our attention and move our attention to something else, because it just feels so important that we have to just kind of focus on it. And then at the bottom you have hypoarousal. So that is when you're kind of numbed out, or you're just not feeling any feelings at all. So you're just kind of cut off and you're just not really aware of what your thoughts and feelings are. And this can seem perhaps less dangerous than the hyperarousal, but it has its own downsides in that when we're under feeling, we tend not to be really kind of connecting with people. So this might be something where we're kind of like in bed for a number of hours, or we're just kind of not really present. In this slide, we're looking at what are the helpful and unhelpful things that you do to try and cope with your very extreme feelings and very difficult feelings. So what you might want to do is look at these 3 points here and maybe stop the video and just get a pencil and paper and write some of them down. So initially we're looking at what are the things that you do that perhaps don't help you in the longer term. So if we're talking about what are the helpful coping strategies and what are the unhelpful coping strategies. You could say that the unhelpful ones are the ones that later on you regret, or perhaps they somehow make the problem worse. So you might want to take one strategy at a time. So for instance, going to bed for a couple of days. So what are the pros and cons of that? So the pros might be that it prevents you from carrying out some other kind of self-harm, and maybe stops you getting into an argument with someone. But maybe the cons are that your family really worry about you because they don't see you for a couple of days. So and then in the final point, it's looking at what are the things that might trigger that off. So what would start you feeling that you want to go to bed? We're now going to do a short mindfulness practice. This will last 2 or 3 minutes. So first of all, just get yourself comfortable, sitting in a kind of relaxed but upright position. If you can, put your feet flat on the floor. Rest your arms somewhere that feel comfortable. And you can either look at something kind of uninteresting like the floor or a wall, or just close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing that. We're just going to take a few moments just to notice what's going on in our body. And we're not trying to relax at this point. What we're doing is just trying to notice what's going on in our body. So starting with your head, just take your focus to your scalp and your face and your neck. Noticing any tension. Does your face feel warm or cold? Does it feel relaxed or tense? Then noticing your shoulders and your arms. Just feeling the position of them, noticing where they're touching the rest of your body or the chair. And then moving your attention to your chest, noticing it rising and falling as you breathe. And then down to your abdomen, to any feelings in your tummy. Perhaps you feel anxious, perhaps you feel hungry, or maybe you don't notice any feelings at all. And moving down to your thighs, feeling them supported by the chair, perhaps noticing your clothes against your thighs. And now noticing your calves, and then again your feet on the ground. And all the time when you're noticing how your body feels, just accepting that that's how it is. Not trying to change it, not trying to be more relaxed. Just noticing how it is. And now we're going to come back into the room, and if you've had your eyes shut, then open them when you're ready. We will be doing some more mindfulness as time goes on, but you can also practice mindfulness. There are various websites where you can practice more. There's various apps. A good website is freemindfulness.org, but also there are many others. There's the Happiness Trap, has got some mindfulness. So we're going to go on to the next slide now. we were in a group, we might now have a discussion about different emotions and what the point in them is. So let's take something like sadness. That can be quite a confusing emotion because it just seems that it's purely negative. Why feel sad? It just seems like something that makes us feel a little bit down and depressed. But if you think about it from an evolutionary point of view, sadness is quite important. It kind of is a warning. It tells us that we've lost something. So if you imagine a duck and it had 7 ducklings, and then one day it noticed that it only had 6, it might first feel a little bit anxious looking for the other duckling, and then eventually it might give up, and then it would feel sad. But that's important from an evolutionary point of view, because if there are no emotions attached to losing a duckling, then it would just carry on and not take any precautions to stop it happening again. And so it would mean that the duck didn't carry on the species. So that's an example of how a feeling is kind of like a warning. So in the same way as if we feel angry, it might be that someone has done something that is kind of against us. So maybe somebody is pushed in front of us in the queue, or maybe we've been doing all the washing up in a house for the whole week and no one else has helped us. And it's kind of like a warning saying that something's wrong, that we're perhaps being taken advantage of. And then of course there's the classic fight or flight, where we feel anxious or afraid. And this has a very useful purpose because it helps us to see that there's danger and that we need to kind of try and run away from it or fight it. But of course, a lot of the time when we feel anxious now, it's when we think that we're going to be kind of perhaps humiliated. So we worry that if we're in a supermarket, that if we get anxious, we might fall over and then people will look at us and we'll feel embarrassed. Or maybe we think that somebody might ask us how we got on with this PowerPoint, what did we understand by it, and that there'll be test questions, which there won't be. But they might worry that they don't understand the PowerPoint and they're going to look foolish in front of other people. And I guess that also has an evolutionary purpose, because it's saying our brain is kind of like saying, don't mess up, try and do your best so that you can stay part of the pack, because we're trying always as humans to kind of keep in with other people so that we're not kind of thrown out of the pack, which when we were much more primitive creatures, if we were thrown out of the tribe, then it would have meant kind of certain death. So that's just a little bit about kind of emotions. There are obviously another emotions like kind of guilt and shame, but we won't go into those right now. So here we have a slide which is looking at how do we reduce our emotional vulnerability. So how do we, in other words, stay strong so that when difficult things comes along, they don't affect us so much. So here we have an acronym that spells out STRONG. So we start with sleep. So try to get the amount of sleep that helps you feel good, and try to keep a regular sleep schedule. So you might want to look at sleep hygiene here. So for instance, going to bed and getting up at roughly around the same time, not napping during the day, avoiding caffeine late at night, that kind of thing. Also making your the place where you sleep just a place for sleep and or sex, but not a place where you have a lot of watching TV, going on your phone, that kind of thing. So T, take care of your physical health. And this is something that we can easily neglect when we get kind of caught up in other things. So this might mean going to see the doctor if you've got physical health problems or an illness, and taking your tablets properly. And I think it's so easy, isn't it, to just forget one. And it's okay just to like forget one or two, but if we don't take things regularly, then they're just not going to have the effects. And then we might be experiencing withdrawal. So at a time when we think that we're having a really difficult day and things are not going well, actually what's happening is we're experiencing withdrawal from a tablet that we would normally take every day. And it can be difficult to go to the doctor sometimes, you're going to make an appointment, and that can be quite a faff, and you might have to wait. You might get questioned as to what it is from a receptionist who you don't know. But it is really important to look after these physical health issues. So R is resist, and here we're talking about resisting alcohol and illicit drugs or non-prescription drugs, but also really anything that is really bad for you. Like, for instance, if you're finding that having a lot of caffeine is bad for you, or having a lot of I don't know, whatever it is that you're kind of addicted to that's not good for you. So then O is once a day do something that is pleasurable and gives you a feeling of being in control or mastering your world. So a pleasurable thing, it could be absolutely anything that you find pleasurable, or it could be something that gives you a feeling that you feel good because you've completed it. So it's sometimes good to kind of make a list of these things, so that rather than, if you're not in a very good mood, it's hard to kind of think of something pleasurable that you might want to do. So you might want to have a list that you can look at. And also, when you're trying to do something that you feel masterful about, is pick something that isn't too difficult. So if you know that you're not that good at DIY, don't think, right, well, I'm going to build a whole cupboard or something. So something that is within your kind of skill set, if you like. So N is for nutrition. Eat a balanced diet. Do not eat too much or too little. Learn about healthy eating. Don't make decisions about food based upon your emotional state at the time. E.g., I'm too upset to eat, or conversely, I'm upset, so I'm going to eat a lot. So it's important to eat kind of regular meals and try not to snack too much. And I think it's very easy, isn't it, to kind of emotionally eat. So that's just something to be aware of. Maybe we're eating not because we're specifically hungry, but we're eating because we feel upset and we think the food will kind of make us feel differently, which of course works in the shorter term, but not necessarily in the longer term. So G is get exercise. Do some form of exercise every day. Try to build up to 10 minutes of sustained exercise each day. So research shows that exercise helps improve people's mood. And in fact, there is some research which shows that exercise on a regular basis, like 3 or 4 times a week, can work as well as an antidepressant. So it's really finding something that you can do, even if it means you're kind of like staying in the house. So it could be an exercise thing on YouTube, or an exercise game, or a kind of online game where you have to kind of move about. Or even things like gardening is very good exercise, and it also means you're kind of getting in with nature. So now, before you look at the next set of slides, it's important that you try these things out. In fact, it's really important. It's much more important than just going through all the videos and watching them and thinking, right, yeah, well, I've done them. So all these techniques only work if you actually do them. Otherwise, it's a bit like watching Mary Berry cook something but not actually cooking it yourself, or watching a gardening program or reading a gardening book. If you're actually going to get better at those things, you have to do them, and this, I can't emphasize this enough. So along with this series, you should have a sleep sheet. And if you read the sleep sheet and do one of the things to improve your sleep this week, so just try one of the things. Again, it's important not to kind of overload yourself and give yourself too much. If you're someone who has like a tendency to really kind of go at things and think, okay, right, I'm going to have like eradicated all my difficulties in the next week, try to kind of be a little bit balanced and just kind of take things one step at a time. So positive ways to well-being. Positive ways to well-being. Choose one activity to improve your general well-being this week. So again, just choose one thing and try doing that, see what effect it has. And then the slide that we just had a moment ago, reducing emotional vulnerability, focusing on sleep, eating, alcohol intake, etc. So pick one of the things from there and have a go at that before you look at the next slide. So I really would emphasize that you just try these things for 1 week And it's fine to go back and look at this video again, but just focus on the one video for a week before you go on to the next slide. Well, it's been great spending time with you, and I hope you've enjoyed this video that we created during the COVID lockdown, and I wish you all the best.